Child sex trafficking is a major global problem. In the U.S. alone, between 100,000 and 300,000 children are victims of the sex trade. They're sold 10 to 15 times a day. In all 50 states and Washington, D.C., there have been cases of human trafficking. We'll explore this problem, look at some answers, this week on American Dream. I'm your host, Nisa Islam. Every day, children are coerced from their homes in the U.S. and around the world and used for sexual trafficking. The U.S. is the #1 destination for international human trafficking. This is a painful topic, but to better understand it, you have to hear from the victims. Let's watch.
My name's Cor. I'm 11 and a half. My mom bought me a karaoke machine for Christmas because I love to sing and dance. I want to be famous. I want to go on tour and travel the world. But my dreams might be over. Today I went missing. Most people won't take a grieving mother seriously until 2 or 3 days after the child's disappearance. By that time, it's too late.
The U.S. State Department estimates between 600,000 and 820,000 people per year are trafficked across national borders. 80% of victims are thought to be women and girls, and 50% are minors. Of 69 girls rescued nationwide, 23 were found in Washington state. This gateway to the East was the first state to criminalize human trafficking. This is big business, generating approximately $9.5 billion each year. It is second only to drug trafficking and international crime. Here's more about the problem.
Each year, about 800,000 to 900,000 people are bought, sold, or forced across the world's borders. Many of them are teenage girls, and some of them are as young as 5 years old. 70% of all trafficked females will become victims of the sex trade industry. The fact is human cargo is easier to move around borders than weapons and drugs. It is, after all, a business worth $7 to $10 billion a year.
Traffickers use their victims as repeat commodities for forced prostitution, rape, child pornography, ritual torture, slave soldiers, child labor, indentured servitude, and organ trafficking. Victims, especially children, frequently encounter the traffickers because the traffickers find it easiest to kidnap and enslave children for longer periods. Children are also quickly becoming the targets for organ theft and transplant. Today, many think this problem is isolated to third world countries and that it is not a problem in the U.S. Therefore, insufficient federal funding has been provided to address the issue, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Watch another clip of the problem.
Those who profit from this form of modern-day slavery do not discriminate, and the victim can be anyone's child. In the United States, the average age of recruitment is 13 years old.
When I turned 12 years old, I started street prostitution. I had a pimp.
We're all under 18. We're all the same age. There would be a few girls that I knew that were like in their 20s or whatever, but they had been doing it since they were our age anyways. I did wait till 12, and these girls were doing it since they were like 8 or 9, and now they're like 23.
In addition to hearing from victims, we wanted to interview experts but couldn't go to their offices because of the sensitive nature of this issue. We interviewed Nathan Wilson. He's the head of the Project Meridian Foundation, whose goal is to rehabilitate the lives of girls and women. We asked him, where are these children coming from?
Well, they're coming from all different regions of the world. They're also coming right here in our own backyard, coming from high schools, from being on the internet There's people that are being brought in, kids are being brought in from Mexico, from Guatemala, a lot of Guatemalans lately, Peruvian, those also from Eastern Europe, China. They get here a few different ways. Some are brought in containers through shipping fleets. Maritime is one of the greatest ways of moving them very rapidly and quickly, but also very unsafely. The other way are false documents. They're created with visas that are counterfeit. They'll be brought into our airports and brought right into the country. And they'll also have controllers with them, or they just bring them across the border. And then also, in the other fact, what we have is our own kids. They just take them over state by state, or they'll just keep them in one area and maintain control over them.
Attorney Michelle Rickard runs the Virginia Coalition Against Human Trafficking. She also explains how children get here.
We find that children from middle-class families all the way down to lower-class families. Typically, the child that we typically see is a child that might come from maybe a foster care home, or might be a child from another, maybe that has touched a service provider before. Courtney's House has a statistic that came out that said that almost all the children that they have seen in their organization has had at least one contact with a service provider before they came into the life. But I have seen children personally that maybe they were lured with a modeling contract and they were lured into this lifestyle. There was one adage that a pimp actually used, and he said, what I do is I walk around the malls, the same malls that you and I walk around, and I walk up to a young girl and I say to her, you've got beautiful eyes. And she looks at me and she says, well, thank you. I move on to another little girl. But she looks down at her feet and says, no, I don't. I know I've got her.
On the streets of D.C., I asked people, where do they think these children are coming from?
I have no idea. I don't know enough about what's happening. They could be neglected children. They could be children who are not neglected but who were picked up.
Perhaps maybe children who are orphaned, children who maybe don't grow up in good areas and don't really have their parents watching over them. They just get lost, perhaps. Not quite sure.
From all over. Africa, China, the Middle East.
I can't say with any sort of certainty, but I would guess countries that are struggling to, where their economies are struggling. So maybe some Eastern Bloc countries of the former Soviet Union, as well as East Asian countries and other countries. I would guess maybe even South America and Central America too, just any countries where there's struggling economies and people are fairly desperate.
They're coming from everywhere now. It used to be an international incident, now it's a national incident, now it's a world incident, including North America. So, and then dealing with the economy and the state of affairs, the way the economy is at the moment, people are looking for desperate means of just basically earning a living.
Victims of child trafficking exist in every corner of the world, though many tend to come from Southeast Asia, the countries of the former Soviet Union, India, and South America. Much of this is due to the nature of our industrialized world. Victims are lured by traffickers who offer promises of a better life, work opportunities, or a chance to live in a more democratic and free society. Some families, desperately poor, are willing to sell one of their children as a sacrifice for the rest of the family. However, the reality is a far cry from the promise of freedom or an escape from poverty and hardship. In the U.S., children are lured away with some of the same incentives. Some victims are runaways. Even boys are trafficked. Watch this clip.
It was the things that he said were things that I've never felt before. I actually felt like I was loved by somebody for the first time. And I put all of my trust and all of my faith in him. And the way that he got me was he told me, let's go for a ride. I got to pick something up in Indianapolis. And he said we were coming back that night. So I drove with him out to Indianapolis. And when we got out there, that's when he told me we weren't going back.
You might think that this is just a big city problem. It's not. Joshua Bailey runs the Gray Haven Project, an organization developing safe houses for the victims of human trafficking. He explains that it's even a problem in Richmond, Virginia.
I think for a couple reasons. One, because it's a city, it's a place, and it's one of those issues that it doesn't matter if it's a small town or a big town. I know in, I think it was North or South Dakota, there's actually in a city with a population of 500 a trafficking ring or a prostitution ring broken up in a small area because there's a truck stop there. So Richmond, you think, okay, small city, it's not, it's not DC, it's not Atlanta, it's not New York City, these major cities, but really when you look at it just from a strategic standpoint, Richmond is kind of nestled in a major transit area. We have Interstate I-95, which travels all the way from the northern part of the U.S. all the way to Florida. And then you also have Interstate 64, which travels from the East Coast, Virginia Beach, through Richmond. So you have these major highways intersecting, and that's a way that traffickers are going to transport girls. So naturally, that's going to be a place where trafficking is going to happen.
What happens to children once they're stolen? Let's listen to some survivors explain.
He would beat me with broomsticks, handles. He would burn me with candles. He would take metal hangers and beat me with them and poke me with them, belts, anything that he can get his hands on, he would beat me with. The one time he had beat me so bad that he had ruptured my spleen and had put me in the intensive care unit. So it's like once you knew that he could almost kill you, you'd rather do what he says than to get beat again.
The thing that keeps them there is violence, is terror. We will kill you, we will beat you.
I asked our experts to describe the victim's life while in bondage.
I would say the worst hell that they've ever been in their life, or anyone could ever even imagine. I can't imagine, you or I hope, could never imagine being raped once. Once they get here, or if they already are here, they automatically get pushed into a situation where they're actually being forced into prostitution. They'll be gang raped. Some of them will be put in rooms and shut down so they don't have anyone to be able to communicate with. At the same time, they're being raped around the clock. They're being broken. And that also then leads into the post-traumatic syndrome, that one of the things that we have to deal with after they're recovered. But even being raped up to 40 times a day for someone else's profit, or for the means of someone, woman or man, to buy them for sexual activity.
Very honestly, it can be a very gruesome process, to be very honest. There's not, I don't know, there's not really a preparation if it's this forced kind of situation. It's not the coercion or the let me talk you into it, but it's the more you're gonna do this. There could be some ploys that can be used, could be things like drug addiction, violence, torture, and those types of methods. And then basically being forced to service purchasers of sex acts.